The year is 2021, and tensions in America have reached their boiling point. Angered by the results of the United States election, Donald Trump, incumbent president of the United States of America, refuses to concede the election to Joseph Biden, the new Democratic candidate for the presidency. Viewing this as an act of treason, Joe Biden would establish the Federal Republic of America, and in quick succession would march on the White House, nearly killing Donald Trump and forcing him to flee to the Midwest. Throughout what would become known as the chaos of the first months, many other groups also seized their best chance at victory and rose up from the ashes. While the two superpowers of the region of the Federal Republic of America and the United States of America were held back from direct conflict due to the Good Friday ceasefire, many at the time knew that peace would not hold, and someone would claim the mantle of America's future. This was the birth of the Second American Civil War. Yet, despite the geopolitics and history of these newly formed warlord factions, I would like to take a detour to a different place. A small cornerstone of what used to be the state of Nevada. A micronation turned actual nation. A leader turned into a superior. This is the Republic of Molossia. Before the Second American Civil War, Molossia was what was considered by many to be a micronation, or in other words, a fake nation, one made simply for fun to replicate how actual nations worked. However, in the ensuing power vacuum, the rise of the People's Republic of America, and the numerous other factions splintered off from the American homeland, Molossia was granted power, and with it, Kevin Baugh was nominated as its presidential leader. Kevin Baugh was not exactly the right man for this. He had not known how to run a country, he was a fake leader in all but name, and the currency his nation used was cookie dough. He was not at all ready for the responsibilities that Molossia had to entertain. However, as refugees started flooding in from the war-torn states of Texas, New Mexico, Colorado, and California, Kevin Baugh rose to the occasion, and in doing so, realized that his purpose now, at the very least, was to support these people for as long as he could, and ensure that they were safe and secure in his newly fledged state. In the early years of his presidency, Kevin Baugh knew that he had to make a decision regarding the political leadership of his nation. He would either continue the expansion of the presidential republic and the enshrining of liberty, or, in the back of his mind, he began entertaining the thought that maybe an imperial presidency was in order, a more authoritarian one, to secure stability amongst the people of Molossia and ensure they would be protected. Fortunately, Kevin Baugh decided against this. He knew that the refugees pouring into his nation and the people that had already been there enjoyed being Molassians due to the fact that his nation might have been the last one that actually enshrined liberty, democracy, and happiness. He knew that a despot could not do this. In a rousing speech, Kevin Baugh announced three main things to expand the presidential republic and make Molossia more democratic. The first thing he did was the announcement of free elections in the future, announcing political parties and their candidacies. In these candidacies, he also supported local community leaders, particularly ones of refugee ethnic and native descent. Finally, 2 months after, he began the Molassian Constitutional Convention. In this new constitution, the rights of all were protected, including racial, sexual, and gender minorities. Along with this, Kevin Baugh adopted many of the Bill of Rights, adapting them to fit Molassia's standards, and above all else, its territorial situation. After this, Kevin Baugh announced the expansion of the domestic sectors, particularly the ones ranging from agriculture and housing. With agriculture, Kevin Baugh wanted to expand the food sector, ensuring that his people had a constant supply of food and would never go hungry. This was a massive success, with a bout of lucky rainfall and above all else, good coordination amongst the refugees. Many farms were built, and their food supply was secured. The housing issue was also addressed, with many houses being built and above all else, homelessness dropping to an unforeseen rate in the area. It was an immense political victory for Molossia, and above all else, Kevin Baugh and its people. This greatly expanded Molassia's economic capabilities, with the GDP per capita of Molossia equating to that of the Federal Republic of America, an astounding feat. In the East, things were not as good as they were in Molossia. Utah, officially now the state of Deseret after a Mormon coup, declared its intentions to reunify the entire Mormon area by force, utilizing military strength to retake what they dubbed the lost territories of Joseph Smith's pilgrimage. At this point, the Molassian military was totally underprepared for any active conflict. Their divisions almost entirely consisted of militiamen, with small cavalry and mechanized forces organized throughout them. However, war had come to their door, and they had to answer. For their liberty, for democracy, and for Molassians. This was their finest hour, and by God they would make it the finest hour of all time. In words spoken directly by Kevin Baugh himself on the eve of his declaration of war against the state of Deseret, Kevin Baugh said, "Molossia is a small nation surrounded by mountains, deserts, and now hostile nations. Though we were content on waiting out the civil war in peace, it has dawned on many that in order to protect our little oasis in the desert, we must act now. With actions being taken to move upon Utahn defensive positions along our border, we will have to fight this war to its fullest if we are to protect our humble way of life in the harsh Nevadan desert." In response, the state of Deseret's leader said one thing and one thing only: "You and what army?" In the first few days of the war, Molossia fulfilled its promise, securing all Utahn defensive positions that rested along its border. However, the Utahn army, better trained, better equipped, and larger, began to push back the Molassian forces, who had no choice but to pull back from all positions and resign to the defense of the mainland. However, even this new defensive line failed, and the Deseret units got ever closer to the Molassian capital of Dayton. The general of the Molassian army, one Doug Walker, a past YouTube influencer who had collaborated with Kevin Baugh in the past to make a comedy skit, was the leader of all armies at this point, and was in desperate need of manpower and equipment, something the Hawthorne ammo depot was supposed to supply, but wasn't. Once again, the Molassian army was forced to retreat under the pressure from the Deseretian army, retreating from the city of Luning and finally establishing a stable defensive line in the few tiles that the 3 units they commanded could actually hold. Finally, after a grueling 3-month undersupplied and undermanned campaign, the Molassian military finally produced a 4th unit that could help partially stop the collapsing front that was approaching the capital city. However, after a good 2 months, Hawthorne finally fell to the Deseretian forces, an absolutely horrifying blow. However, there was something that General Doug Walker recognized. The Deseretian army had completely left their back flank open, leaving the city to encirclement. This was the definitive battle of Molossia. So how about we look at it from up close? Doug Walker ordered 2 small infantry regiments to hold the mountains, correctly predicting that the Deseretian units were most likely going to move into them, as they believed that they were totally bereft of any form of Molassian infantry, cavalry, or for that matter, any force at all. Due to this, the Deseretian units were caught off guard when they tried to descend on them, being locked in place by the infantry, while 2 small reconnaissance units swing behind them, forcing them to stay in the mountains without any form of escape. While this was occurring, Doug Walker ordered a small cavalry unit to drive over to the city of Hawthorne, where the Deseretian units were encamped outside the city, currently asleep. As the cavalry unit sped by, the commander of the unit ordered a feigned retreat, yelling at his units to retreat backwards. Using this, the Deseretian units were awoken and decided to pursue them, just as Doug Walker had hoped they would. As the Deseretian units approached the mountains to try and find that cavalry unit, the real cavalry came in from behind, going behind to Hawthorne, taking the city, and finally pinning every Deseretian unit within the mountains. Under-equipped, damaged, bloody, and above all else, without support, the Deseretian units were doomed, encircled, and after a 1-day campaign to remove them from the mountains, the Deseretian units finally fell. After the battle at Hawthorne, any offensive Deseretian units that were primed along the Molassian border were swiftly taken care of in quick succession. In the coming days, the entire offensive force that was designated for Molossia was destroyed. You heard that right. Every unit that had been primed at Molassia's border was now either dead, missing, or captured. A devastating blow for Deseret, one that they would never recover from, as they were too committed now to the two other fronts that they were already fighting, that being the Bandit Territory and the America Reich. This was it. They had lost the war, and now it was simply a march to Salt Lake City, which would fall in the 18th of May, 2023. Finally, on August 1st, at midnight, the state of Deseret surrendered to Molossia. In the ensuing negotiations regarding territorial acquisition, Molossia was granted almost the entirety of western Deseret due to their instrumental participation in the war. This land would further be cored, and due to the fact that Molassian garrisons had already been present there long before the state of Deseret had capitulated, many of these lands were already accustomed and primarily excited with Molassian living. This greatly bolstered Molassia's pools of manpower, economics, and most importantly, industry. However, in what will become dubbed as the aftermath, none of these three victors of the Deseret War had exactly returned to stability, with many of them engaging in forms of governmental collapse or military expansionism. For instance, in the state of Molossia, Molossia had decided to descend upon its local neighbors of Las Vegas and Area 51. Las Vegas had opted to join Molossia voluntarily, however Area 51 did not, and citing horrendous civil rights abuses within Area 51, Molossia descended upon them, taking the state within a couple of weeks. Upon reaching Area 51, Molassian units discovered on the other side of Deseret, in Primitivia, an anarcho-primitivist state led by the infamous domestic terrorist Ted Kaczynski, the entire government had been reshuffled and the entire structure of the nation had been changed, being reorganized into the 2nd National Protection Army and being administered by a local federal representative from the past American government. Finally, in the South, in one of the most crucial moments of the entire Second American Civil War and the establishing part for peace within the Southwest, the American Empire fell apart. After being couped by the Legion of the Sun, James Mason was killed, and with it, his army disintegrated, defected to other sides, or simply put, went missing, never to be seen again. Taking advantage of the weakened state that the Legion of the Sun was in due to their military collapse, Molossia and the 2nd National Protection Army, now a part of the official Freedom Coalition, descended on the Legion of the Sun, splitting the nation between each other via east and west borders, and carefully and peacefully administrating the regions into their respective territories. In the coming years, the Federal Republic of America, with its great military industry, economy, and military expertise, would become the victorious faction of the United States of America, unifying the entire nation by 2028. However, when it came time to actually discuss the fate of the Freedom Coalition, and in particular Molassia's fate in the United States, Congress was very divided in the issue. Some wanted to outright militarily invade the nation, citing the fact that nationalism and factionalism was the main cause for the Second American Civil War in the first place, and that more partisanship and autonomy was not needed right now. Centralism was needed, and that could not be achieved with an independent Molossia. Other senators believed that they should incorporate Molossia, but it should be done through peaceful means and through negotiations, citing the fact that a military incursion into Molossia would be costly due to their increased military size, weaponry, and above all else, the fact that they now had an established nationality, one that they were willing to fight for. In the end, President Kamala Harris decided in a famous Molassian compromise one thing. Molossia would be reintegrated into the United States, which Molossia agreed with. However, they would be given a trinket of appreciation for the role that they played in saving the United States. Molossia, along with Puerto Rico and the District of Columbia, would be integrated as a U.S. state, with the territories it held before reunification becoming its newfound territories. In the following years after the Second American Civil War, the state of Molossia would grow exponentially, with cities like Las Vegas and Boston growing rapidly in the economic sectors, rivaling that of European cities. As it stands, Kevin Baugh is regarded as the state's national hero, known by many as Brave Baugh, he would retire from politics after the Second American Civil War, quoting, "I am very tired. I have done a lot for this state, but right now, I really want to take a nap." Unfortunately, as is with all good things, they come to an end eventually. On December 25th, 2063, at the age of 100, Kevin Baugh would pass away peacefully in his sleep. In the memorial service for him, many came out to vocalize support and to pay respects to the man that saved the Southwest. In a rousing speech by the incumbent president of the time, it was said, Kevin Baugh was more than just a leader, he was a hero. He saved millions of people from extremism, bloodshed, and war. He saved people that thought they were lost. He inspired the masses to take up arms and defend the liberties that we defend today. And there can be no greater respect given than to those actions. Kevin Baugh is a modern American hero, one that will be the one in 1,000 that are remembered by history. However, if not that's not the last anyone ever saw of Kevin Baugh by us. A myth emerged, folklore one might call it, that sometimes when you go to the mountain peaks in Hawthorne and you look up in the sky on a sunset, maybe you can see him up there in the clouds that are hanging over and see him snacking on a bowl of cookie dough, looking over the citizenry that he loved so much. Forever, always watching, always caring, always loving. It might just be a myth. It might just be a folklore. It might just be crazy talk. But I like to think he does that. I like to think he does.